This week we have a double parsha, Acharei-Mot mot-kedoshim. There's a lot of picking to do because usually Parshas Kiseitzi has the most mitzvahs. But when Acharei-Mot and Kedoshim are together, I believe they have the most mitzvahs in, I guess, depending on whose count you use in one parsha. So we'll pick a mitzvah in Parshas Kedoshim, Perek Yutes, Pasuk Yud Zayin, it looks like. Vostina es achicha bilvavecha, don't hate your brother in your heart. Hochiach tochiach es amisecha, you should give rebuke. Vosisa love chait, and it shouldn't lead to sin. So we'll discuss a little bit about the mitzvah of tochacha, the mitzvah of giving rebuke to one's friend. Apparently, if you see someone doing something wrong, what are the gedarim exactly? Does it apply today? When do you? When don't you? Mm-hmm. So we'll begin with a Gemara in Beya. The Gemara in Beya talks about the prohibition of dancing and clapping on Shabbos. Apparently, most people don't know about this prohibition, as we'll see in the Ar-Haterim as well, but the Gemara is not too happy with it. The Gemara talks about, and then also the Gemara says, but everyone does it anyway. And therefore the Gemara says, Mutter v'yeshogim v'atei mezid, and they're going to do it anyway. Once you get into Friday Night Live, call back, forget about it. Try speaking to people about it. So better not to say anything, better that they do it b'shogeg, unintentional than intentional. Again, Tosfos here deals with why Bizman Hazeh, he thinks it's okay. Either you could deal with the issue of why people don't really know how to dance today, or people don't know how to fix musical instruments. But it's Ramosha has a truth. It's not so simple, because once changing the gzeira, even if it isn't true anymore, is it so simple to change if the gzeira is? Either way, that's a different minhagim today in different shuls. It's either you love it, either you're a big, either you think you're doing a big mitzvah, or you think you're doing an aveira. There's not much in between on this Friday Night Live, dancing and singing. So either way, so first the Gemara says, okay, so we see the principle, better to be shogeg than mezid, but that only applies perhaps to a din d'Rabbanan, because we're talking about dancing and clapping is only d'Rabbanan. It might lead to a biblical prohibition of fixing a musical instrument. So the Gemara says no. It even applies to a biblical law. And the Gemara talks about the mitzvah of Tosefes Yom HaKippurim. There's a mitzvah we know every Friday night, every Yantov, of Tosefes Shabbos, Tosefes Yantov. That's a discussion among the Rishonim. We assume that's also Daraisa, but many Rishonim, most Rishonim say it's Daraisa, some say it's Darabanan. So that's a Shaila by Tosefes Shabbos and Tosefes Yantov. However, Tosefes Yom HaKippurim, everyone agrees, even the Rambam, who makes no mention of Tosefes Shabbos and Tosefes Yantov, he counts, it's the Gemara Numa, he counts Tosefes Yom HaKippurim as a mitzvah in our Torah. So Gemara says, we see, because Tosfos there points out that it says, don't be mocha, the women who are eating up until Shkia, or very close to Shkia, on Erev Yom Kippur, don't be mocha them because they're going to do it anyway. So we see the klal of mutav sheyeshogegin v'atei mezidin applies not only to a mitzvah midrabanan, or an issa drabanan, but it also applies to a daraisa. That even though Tosefes Yom HaKippurim is a daraisa, and after they're eating, they're taking away from this mitzvah in our Torah of Tosefes Yom HaKippurim. Nevertheless, Tosfos over the Gemara, Tosfos explains the Gemara says not to make a macha. So we see it even applies to a daraisa. That's the Gemara. And then other Rishonim, other Achronim want to take it further. But what about something which is mafurish v'kra? Maybe it only applies to something which is min Torah, like Tosefes Yom HaKippurim, But doesn't, if you open up the Chumash, you wouldn't see Tosef Yom Kippurim. It's going down from a drasha. So maybe only those type of deraises we say mutav sheishogim, but maybe a din which is mafurish bekra. So then we'd say we don't say mutav. That's what some suggest. And why? Why do they suggest that? Because everything which is mafurish bekra, it's obviously everyone knows. So if they know it, then they're probably not shogegin. So Achronim point out today, unfortunately, that isn't the case. That the many things, even mafurish bekra, that people don't even know are prohibited. And perhaps the Seres Dibros they know, who knows if they even know that. So it's Shechras HaTorah before the Yemos HaMashiach. So it's coming true. So the bottom line is, it's clear the Gemara says the principle applies to a deraisa. It's a discussion among the Rishonim Achronim, but even applies to a mafurish bekra. But either way, that's the klal in the Gemara, that better someone violate a sin unintentionally than violate the sin b'meisin. That's the klal of the Gemara. So, keeping that in mind, the Avnei Nezer will work with a similar approach. So the question is, how far does the mitzvah of tochacha go? So there's a Gemara in Yevamos which says, just like there's a mitzvah to rebuke someone when they're going to listen to you, so too there's a mitzvah to keep your mouth shut when they're not going to listen to you. Of course, how do you know when they will listen, when they won't? You have to assess the situation. You never know anything for sure, but whatever calculations have to go into it, you'll figure it out. And if you think that person's going to listen, then there's a mitzvah to give them rebuke. But if you don't think they're going to listen, so better to keep your mouth shut. It's a mitzvah to keep your mouth shut. The same way it's a mitzvah normally to give rebuke under the right situation. It's a mitzvah to keep your mouth shut. Similarly, usually it's a mitzvah to fast on Yom Kippur. But when someone's a cholish eish bo sakana, it's a mitzvah to eat on Yom Kippur. So similarly, usually it's one should give tochacha, but it's only when it seems going to have, when there's someone who's willing to listen. However, from the Gemara in Erechin and Daf Zayin, we seem to find a different approach. The Gemara in Erechin and Daf Zayin wants to know how far does the mitzvah rebuke go. So you have a three-way machlokus in the Gemara. Rav Yochanan says that basically you talk to the person, you size up the situation. Okay, so if you see that tuning out to you, then you're ready. Then change the topic. Talk about Amari hitting the fire. People say it definitely was an emergency after that second game, but to talk about who does the better, Tebow, Pierce, or whatever you want to change the topic to. But if it's not going, just move on. You have to do. And other opinion says, Rab, I think, says ad ketei kola. You have to keep on going. You don't have to get cursed out, but up until the guy's going to curse you, that's how far you have to go. And Shmuel, I think the Rambam Paskin's like, ad kedei haka, until he's about to hit you. You don't have to actually take the physical abuse, but stop right before he's about to lose it. So we see so it seems to be an apparent contradiction between the two Gemaras. Because in the Gemara in Yevamos, it appears that you only give rebuke when you think you're going to get listened to. But if you realize that you're going to get tuned out, or worse, get abused, or whatever they're going to do to you, then it's a mitzvah. Not only it's a bad thing to do, it's a mitzvah to keep your mouth shut. From this Gemara, it seems to say, no, keep on going. You have to take a potential up until you're going to get cursed out, up until you're going to get beat up. Meaning it seems to be, but the Gemara in Erechin seems to be taking it further. So how do we reconcile the two Gemaras? In Yevamos, it seems you only give rebuke when someone's going to listen. And from Gemara Erechin, it seems to you go further. More than even if he's not listening, you keep on going until he's about, it's not that he's listening, until he's about to lose it and blow up on you. So how do we reconcile? So the Avnei Nezer says we could reconcile as far, as follows. It depends if the person is doing the sin b'shogeg or b'mezid. Is the one doing the sin unintentional or intentional? In other words, the Gemara in Yevamos, which says it's only a mitzvah to rebuke someone when they're listening, but if they're not listening, it's a mitzvah to keep your mouth shut. That's talking about someone who did the Aveir b'shogeg. But the Gemara in Erechin is talking about with it ad k'dei kolak, ad k'dei hakah. That's about someone who's v'hacha, someone who's doing it b'mezid, and therefore if he's doing it b'shogeg, so then you only, the mitzvah of tocha apparently is a little less. You only have to assess the situation, because why make it worse? Why torture him into a mezid? But by Erechin, if he's mezid already anyway, what's the difference? You have nothing to lose except getting cursed out or beat up, so you just keep on giving him mussar until he's either about to change or about blow up, then stop. So either way, that's how the Abnei Nezer says. The difference is, if it's shogeg, so we don't want him to turn into a mezid, so it's a mitzvah to keep quiet, because this way he's only doing the sin b'shogeg. But Erechin, it's mezid anyway, to keep on going. So the kasha the Abnei Nezer asked on himself is, but still not logical. Who cares if he's mezid or shogeg? If he's mezid, he's not going to listen. That's not going to help the situation. If he's not going to listen, what's the difference shogeg? Even if he's mezid, why bother giving the rebuke? So therefore, that's what the Abnei Nezer raises that question. However, we can interrupt the Abnei Nezer's question. This question is, and we'll come back, we'll give it another answer anyway, but why is it, if someone's b'mezid, why give the rebuke? If it's not going to help anyway, what's the point? So perhaps we could say based on something else. There's a principle we have in the Gemara at many places, but the Mishnah in Bava Metzia, Gemara in Bava Metzia, about on the topic of Darshinan time in the Kra, Gemara in Sanhedrin, is a famous dispute with Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda. In other words, the case is it says don't take collateral from a widow, and presumably because a widow is poor, she has to have anyone supporting, giving her money. So, and maybe it's her only one, so you don't want to take her only blanket, or because that's the halacha. It's a pasuk in the Chumash, don't take collateral from a widow. So the Gemara of Metzia has an interesting machokas Rabbi Yehuda of Shimon. What about a wealthy widow? She inherited a nice life insurance policy, or she's independently wealthy. Whatever the case is, it's a wealthy widow. So then am I allowed to take collateral from her? So Rabbi Yehuda says, Eino darshinan time in the Kra. I have no right. The Torah tells me not to take collateral from a widow. Period. End of discussion. I have no right to start going into the reasons. And Rav Shimon disagrees and says darshinan time in the Kra. Take the reason, we can take the reason and limit or expand the scope of the mitzvah. So, who do we pass like? We normally pass like Rabbi Yehuda, Eino darshinan time in the Kra. And therefore, we can't take collateral from a wealthy widow. So, however, Rabbi Yehuda agrees in a case where it's mafurish for Kra, if we know the reason, then even Rabbi Yehuda agrees you could darshinan time in the Kra. So for instance, when we have, by the Gemara it says in Sanhedrin, the second parak, well, yeah, the Yitzhak by a king, or Yarba will Nashim, he can't have many wives. So Rabbi Yehuda writes, that only depends if they're non-observant wives. But if they're going to be from wives, you can have 100 of them. In other words, he's darshinan. The Torah says because we don't want you to have too many wives because they'll take you away from the service of God. But if you can have good wives, from wives, so then the more the merrier, or at least you can have them anyway. So we see even Rabbi Yehuda agrees if it's mafurish b'kra, you could darshin in time in the kra. You with me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what does it have to do with tochacha? What is it? So that's what we have to see. So what's the pshat in the Chumash when we read the pasuk? Hochiach tachiras amisecha. It says you should rebuke your friend. The pasuk says, "V'lo sisa alav chet," but do not bear a sin because of him. What does that mean? The end of the pasuk, "V'lo sisa alav chet." So Rashi learns it's just being descriptive. The pasuk. Be very, very careful when you give your friend rebuke, because you might have doing something worse. Your rebuke might be worse than the sin. In other words, let's say, I wouldn't call it a trivial sin, but let's say it's more of a minor infraction. And by giving the rebuke in the wrong way, you can embarrass someone, barabim, which is a serious offense. So Rashi is saying, when you give the tochacha, make sure you do it in a way where it doesn't cause you to sin more. It doesn't make the sin worse. But not the sin itself, but being descriptive, that you don't make the situation worse as it is, and make sure you do it in an appropriate way, in a private fashion. That's the way Rashi learns. The Ramban learns no. He says, don't make it worse. You know what it means when the Torah says below sisa lav chet, don't make it worse? That you have to weigh the situation. If by giving tochacha, it's going to make the situation, the guy's going to do a lahachas, he's going to sin even more, or you're going to turn him off, he's going to go away. In other words, you have to weigh the situation. The way the Ramban is learning the pasuk is telling me you have to weigh the scenario and see if your words are going to be taking heed. In other words, according to the Ramban, it seems to be a result-oriented mitzvah. The point of giving tochacha, if it causes a better result. But if there's not going to be a better result, if the result is going to be if the result is going to be sisa alav chet, then there's no mitzvah of tochacha. So therefore, the way the Ramban learns, we could say it's like mafurish pekra. It's like the Torah is telling me the reason behind tochacha. Give tochacha if it's going to make the situation better. But if it's not going to make it better, then no. Obviously, it could be the Avnei Nezer is learning the pasuk like Rashi, and therefore it's not mafurish pekra. Therefore, the Avnei Nezer asks, what about Eino Darshin in time in the Kra? And in fact, it's an interesting rush. That even if you want to say tochacha is a mafurish pekra, but there is a Rosh sheet to the sheet of Mukubetis brings down, even if it's implied from the pasuk, that's a big chiddush of the Rosh. Even if it's implied from the pasuk, that's enough. Like where does he get it from? There's a prohibition. You can't muzzle your animal when they're working in the field, because sar ba'alichayim, when they're eating, working. Let's say they're working in a field which is poison, or like thorns, and they're going to get. It's going to cause a lot of pain to them if they eat. It'll be very dangerous. So the Rosh says, of course, you muzzle them, because the purpose to muzzle them is to protect the animal. And well, normally muzzling them is because it's not right. But in a case where if you don't muzzle them, they're going to die or be. So the Rosh's chiddush is even in an implied case, even if it's implied from the pasuk, that's enough. So certainly if it's mafurish pekra, so that's how others can answer that. The Avnei Nezer in other words, the Avnei says, Avnei Nezer's distinction is shogeg versus mezid, but he himself asked, I said, logically, even if you're mezid, then why bother telling him if it's not going to help the situation? He just says, what can I do? I know darshin in time in the Kra. I can't, the Torah gives me a mitzvah of tochacha, and I can't darshin, they ever have to do it anyway. So either way, we'll see. We'll give an answer called the Avnei Nezer. We'll see that there could be a different aspect of tocha as well. But that's the Avnei Nezer's answer, shogeg versus mezid. However, we said, but we're saying is, there's no point, even if it's mezid, even Rabbi Yehuda agrees you can be darshin in time in the cross. So let's have another answer. So another answer is the answer of the Ritva. The Ritva in Yevamah is over there by the Gemara, I think it's Samach Hey, which talks about the mitzvah to rebuke someone when they're going to listen, to keep quiet when they won't. he wants to make a distinction, Yachid versus Tzibor. Are you talking one-on-one, or are you giving group therapy? So, the Gemara in Erechim, which says, you go ad kedei haka, ad kedei kola, that's one-on-one. But the Gemara in Yevamos, which says it's a mitzvah to keep quiet when they won't listen, that's talking about group therapy. And in fact, the Shulchan Aruch seems to say like the Ritva, but the question is, what's the pshat in the Ritva? Like, what do you mean? What's the difference? Why should there be a difference between Yachid and Tzibor? Is it a fundamental difference or a technical difference? Let me explain what I mean. Are we saying basically, is the Ritva saying is that fundamentally the definition of Tochacha is one-on-one. When you're talking to a tzibor, you could call it something else, but that's not hochiach tochiach. There is no mitzvah of tochacha when you're giving rebuke to the rabbim. That is the Ritva saying it's limited to a yachid. The mitzvah of tocha, and that's why yachid yes, tzibor no. Or no. Maybe the Ritva agrees fundamentally there's no difference. The mitzvah of tochacha applies equally to yachid versus tzibor. If that's the case, then so why do we make a distinction? It's a much more pragmatic one. When you're working one-on-one, you call a person over, you do it in the proper way, he's more likely to listen to you. But when you're speaking to a lot of people, it's always a challenge when you're giving a Mussar Shmuz or talking, because different people need different things. So therefore, maybe it's just a pragmatic thing. And really maybe the mitzvah applies to Rabbim as well. So that's the shiloh within the Ritva. Is he saying that fundamentally the mitzvah of Tocha only applies to a Yachid, or maybe not? It applies, in theory, it applies equally to a Yachid and a Tzibor, but pragmatically, you have much better success rate talking to a Yachid than you do to a Tzibor. So that's the Ritva's distinction, that the Avnei was Shogin versus Mezid, the Ritva is Yachid versus Tzibor. When you're talking to a Yachid, then you come down hard, ad kedei haka, because then you assess the situation, you have a better chance of being answered. Again, assuming, it could be that if you assume you're not going to be answered, then maybe the Ritva would agree with the first thing we're saying. But whenever that mitzvah of tocha applies, that's the distinction the Ritva makes. However, what's to suggest a third answer? The Shita Mukubetis quotes from the Ramosha HaKohen, known as the Ramach. I'm sure you feel a little bond, because Ramosha HaKohen. So up to now we were saying a stira in the Gemara. It seemed to be an apparent contradiction. The Gemara in Yevamos seemed to say only give tochacha when it's going to be listened to. And the Gemara in Erechim seems to say even if it's not. How far you go, that's a discussion, but you give tocha even if it's not going to be listened to. So Ramosha HaKohen, very interesting now that I even put it together. He gives a psychological approach. And you're thinking of psychology, so how fitting. So he says, really it's not a contradiction, because and the older you get, the more you deal with people. I'll have to tell Ben, I'm sure I must have told Ben this, the more you see how true this is. That what happens, when if you're dealing with kids, you're dealing with students, you're trying to teach them a lesson, you're giving them Mussar, or whatever the case may be, Hadracha. So you get different reactions from kids. Sometimes they just go crazy, you give them quiet time, they start throwing stuff across the room, or they just don't listen, they just go to mommy, whatever the case may be. Or sometimes you get so frustrated after a loss, you just go to the fire extinguisher, you just break the glass. But say what you want about it, at least, I heard one guy would say, at least he cared. One guy was going to take the positive. They wanted to give Amari a pass. At least he cared enough that they lost, as opposed to going back in and it's like when you have a mentality of losing, it doesn't bother you anymore. So there is some positive way. And And people point out it really wasn't about that night because he didn't have a bad game. Let's say he only had about 8 shots, and Melo had about 30. And it's more frustration since he used to be the star, and now since Carmelo came, it's been lights out for him. They haven't fit in. So basically, the point being, you get different reactions. Sometimes people react very harshly; they go psycho. So what the Ramach is saying is no kasha. It's all in harmony. You only give rebuke when it's going to help. It's result oriented, like we're saying. The Gemara says, and that's what the Gemara Yevamah says. What about Erechid? Kedei Akah? No. Sometimes you hit a chord. How do you know when sometimes you say something, it hits a chord with the person you really got to? You hit a nerve. Why? Because that's something that's bothering him. And many times in life, it's hard to see your own mum yourself. So when you see it in someone else, that's when it really bothers. That's why I think Rav Wolbe writes, the biggest musr is to have kids, because you see your own chesronis in your own kids, and then you internalize and you try to get better. But sometimes, what's the worst thing could happen? You're in class, you're trying to make a key point about Shabbos, kosher, and then totally not disinterest, not interest, not even with. So they're not even at least. Or as opposed to you're talking about sneas and then the kids are arguing back. Well, at least there's something going on there. There's some interest. So that's what the Ramach is saying. Of course, that means you hit a chord. They're listening. Keep on going. Once they break out and too far, that's it. That's what the Gemara in Erechid is telling me. You got them. Continue. Use the right approach. But the klal is, you only give rebuke when it's going to help. But the fact that they're getting angry, that means you're getting to them. The worst possible response sometimes is no response. Cognitive dissonance, just totally ignoring, deflecting, and not even goris you. That's even more frustrating sometimes. And that's what the Ramach is saying. And that's what we see. That's the yesod. That the different. So we see there, actually we can say there are two aspects of the mitzvah of tochacha. We saw according to the Ramban, it seems to be result oriented. And we explained that makes sense logically. The only point to give tochacha is that if it's going to make the situation better. What about according to what the Avnei Nezer is saying based on Rashi? Let's say, sometimes you have to give tochacha according to some, even if it's not going to help. What's the logic behind that? Giving tocha in a case where it's not going to be, we give an answer where we say it will be. In a case where let's assume it's not going to help. Why does it still make sense? And we find by the markets, like the last couple, Boel Paro, even when Paro lost his Bechira, according to some, nevertheless, Moshe was still warning him. Because there's a second aspect. There's the aspect of the B'nadam L'Chaveiro, that you want that person to do better, and it's all about the result-oriented. But there's another aspect of Kavod Shamayim. That B'makam Chil Hashem Ein Cholkin Kavod L'Rabo. If sometimes you have to, certain things are going on, and not to make a macha, even if you're not going to get listened to, but sometimes you just got to make a macha to show this isn't what Judaism is all about. This is not what we stand for, or you have to make a macha. Like I remember when I was growing up in New York City, many years ago, when we had the rallies for Soviet Union, Russia, so there were different schools of thought among the Gedolim, what was the best way. Some felt you should rally, actually go, demonstrate, go to the streets of Manhattan, and on one Sunday a year we had a rally. Others felt, what are you talking about? It might be good for you, but you're making it worse for the Jews in Russia. So Rav Taitz's shita was, from Elizabeth, he says, you should send letters to your congressman. So whatever you speak to the experts, whatever the Gedolim in consultation with the experts decide, you should do whatever you're going to do, but you should do something. You have to make a macha. And that's what we see for the Gemara in Sota. We know there are 3 advisors to Paro: Eov, Bilam and Yisro. And the Gemara says in Sota, the Medrash, they are all rewarded and punished, Mida Keneged Mida. They were rewarded and punished, Mida Keneged Mida. Yisro, who gave up a prominent position, again, because Paro said, what should we do with, how should we solve the Jewish problem? So Yisro wasn't getting, Yisro ran out, I can't be part of this. And he gave up a prominent position, he got a prominent position, his kids later became descendants on the base din. Bilam said kill the Jews. Later on, as Bilam ben Boar Hargu Lachara, Bilam himself was killed. Eov, we know he had a life of suffering. So because Eov sat there quietly and said nothing to Paro, so we know Eov was the typical person in Tsar. So the Brisker Rav says, Bishkoma, I understand Yisro Mida Keneged Mida, I understand Bilam Mida Keneged Mida. But Eov, what does keeping quiet have to do with a life of pain? So the Brisker Rav says, and I'll give a different parable, but let's say it happens in camp, it happens in the dorm, I guess it could happen anywhere, but more likely in camp or in the dorm when someone's taking a shower, either you like playing with the pipes or it just happens by itself, and suddenly just the boiling hot water comes out. And you're in the shower and you scream, and you jump out of the shower and you scream. Alright, so the question is, what is screaming enough? Is screaming going to take away your first degree burn you have on your back? No. But as they say in Yiddish, if it hurts, you scream. So if you see other Yidden suffering, if Eov was there, you make a macha. Even if it's not going to, there's two aspects to a macha. There's one macha, you always try to get the desired result. That's the reason to make a macha. But even if you don't think you're going to get the desired result, sometimes you got to make a macha. Either kavod shamayim, or in this case, to try to stop the suffering of other Jews. And that's the pshat. Those are the two aspects of, there's aspects of Bedadam Machavero, result-oriented, and there's aspects of Bedadam Lamakam of Kavod Shamayim. So let's summarize. We discussed about how far the mitzvah of Tochacha. So first we thought maybe it only applies to a mitzvah d'Rabbanan because it talked about dancing and clapping. The Gemara says no, it even applies to a mitzvah d'Oraisa, Tosefes Yom HaKippurim. A further discussion among the Rishonim Achronim, what about Bisman Hazeh? What about if something's if it's mafurish for kra, and people, even today people don't even know that, so some people say mutiv sheyeshogam even on something which is mafurish for kra. And then we discussed how far does it go. So the Gemara in Yavamas, it's a mitzvah to give rebuke when you're going to listen, it's a mitzvah to keep quiet when they're not going to listen. The Gemara Erechim seems to say no, you give rebuke even when they're not going to listen, you have to go up until the point where you're going to get patchis or cursed at. So we had three approaches. The Avdei Nezer made a distinction between shogeg and mezid. If you're doing the sin b'shogeg, so that's the Gemara in Yevamos, and better to keep your mouth shut, because why make it worse for the guy? If the person did a sin b'mezid, so then you might as well give him, then you could give him tocha. But it doesn't make any sense. Even if he's doing it b'mezid, why make it even worse? So the answer is you're right, but even though it's not logical, but darshin and time in the crowd. The mitzvah of tocha applies. It's not and then we point out, no, maybe we could even say that we can darshin and time in the crowd, because maybe like the Ramban, this is mafurish b'krut, the Machokas Rashi Ramban, how you learn the pasuk, O Sisa Rav Chay, is that this being descriptive, be very careful the way you give tochacha, like the Ramban, it's talking about the actual tochacha. When you give the tochacha, don't make the sin worse. In other words, if it's going to make it worse, then there's no mitzvah of giving it. So we said maybe we can darshin and time in the craft, and we had the Ritva, the difference between Yachid versus Sibor. That either it's a fundamental difference that the definition of tochacha is one-on-one, or no, there's no fundamental difference, just pragmatically you have a better chance of being matzliach when you do a one-on-one. But the Gemara, when you're dealing with Sibor, so you're not likely to be it's not likely to be listened to. So that when the Yaakov we're talking about the Gemara in Erechim, but then you have a better chance to be listening to Yavamas is talking about Tzibor. Then we had the Ramach or Moshe HaKohen that there is no stira. You only give Tocha when they're going to listen. But that's what the Gemara is saying, is the worst thing is no reaction. They're getting upset. You hit a chord, keep on going. You're in the right direction. And that's what we point out, the different aspects to the mitzvah of Tochacha that we see. And that's Gufa to make shalom between the Ramban and Rashi and the other Achronim, the Abdei Nezer and others, that really they're both aspects. Because of course we always shoot for the desired result that the person will stop sinning. However, there's another aspect of Kavod Shamayim, B'nadam L'makom, the Yemeka Macha, even if the person, even if you know they're not going to listen. And therefore you always have to weigh the situation carefully to know how to get rebuke, because as the Torah tells us, either be very careful not to embarrass someone publicly when you're giving rebuke. In fact, that's part of the discussion by Kriyas HaTorah, correcting the Baal Koreh. You have different sheets in terms of what type of mistake warrants rebuke, because you could be dealing with Mavayis and Rabim or not, but that's a separate discussion. And then in the Ramban, that's good for the mitzvah tochacha, is to get the desired result.